Okay, hello everybody. Another round of virtual DataTribe from all over the world.
Cool. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening or this morning, wherever from wherever you're joining us from. It's really lovely to see you. It's lovely to be back. Yeah, so today we're going to later on hear from Brian, who's joined us all the way from Utah. He's going to be talking about Halo site solution for meeting long text data challenges in Tableau CRM. We are looking forward to it. We have, just to let you know, our organisers tonight, myself and Ines, and supported by Maritina, although she's not with us on the call. She's been helping out behind the scenes. And once again, we're virtual. So yeah, it's been great. Thank you for those who've already let us know where you've joined us from. It's been, it's always very interesting to see, how many countries, how many different sorts of countries people are based in. Just a few pointers on screen. Just be careful of any background noise. So
everybody else lose Will?
No, okay, sometimes that's the same.
He's a
little self-conscious about his background noise, I guess. So.
Ines, do you want to take over, or?
Yeah, I'm on it. Okay, welcome to my very messy workspace. You are somewhere here, and there you go. So we have. I wanted to share with you that we have this group in the online community. I was to share with you as well. Do you have the link of? You share with me. Sorry. There you go. This link over here, and I'm just gonna put it in the chat that kindly we have in the help community some bunch of links that you can join the Slack that we have in common, and some other places as well, the different meetups that we have. And tons of different things, blogs, channels, everything about Tableau CRM and beyond. So lots to chew from. You should have that in the chat. And then what else to tell you from here? Those are the handlers of today. This community shares the love, and sharing is caring. So it's important as well to make some noise. Some of the things that you may see in the session today that you're interested, that you like, things that you want us to cover in the next ones around, then please let us know. And if we have Will with us?
we do. Apologies.
Yes.
My internet temporarily
what
dropped
brought
out.
the content today? You are the instigator of the session.
Indeed. Apologies for just dropping off and dropping around. Right. Cool. So I'm just going to reshare screen, pick up from where we were. I haven't got. I'm not echoing. No. Okay. Cool. So thank you, Ines, for picking that up. So basically, how did this session all come about? So I wanted to just give you guys a bit of a background. So in October last year, ISVs were invited to participate in the Tableau CRM hackathon. The idea being to obviously to have fun, to show off your Tableau CRM skills, maybe even test some ideas for some future app development, and also the possibility for the ISV TCRM experts to interact with the Tableau product managers and experts at Salesforce. There were 4 categories being judged in the hackathon. Best end-to-end app, the best community impact, the best technical showcase, and the best Lightning Web Component app. HaloSite, I'm delighted to announce, they were judged winners of the best Lightning Web Component category. And they were judged on fully leveraging their Lightning Web Component, having an innovative user interface, and integration with Salesforce, and also integration of the solution with Tableau CRM dashboards. So I thought it'd be nice for the DataTribe to have HaloSite come and demo and showcase their solution to you guys. So without further ado, I shall introduce Brian Wise, who is the Chief Data Officer at HaloSite, and I shall let Brian sort of take it over from here.
Thanks, Will. Just let you stop your sharing, and then I'll take over.
That should be there.
All right. Is that coming up okay now?
Yes.
Awesome. So as Will said, my name is Brian Wise. I'm the Chief Data Officer at HaloSite, and what you're seeing today is started with the hackathon and is something that we now have inside of our product. So we'll take you through that a little bit. Quick agenda for what I plan to uncover, do some brief introductions of myself and the company, talk a little bit about why unstructured data, why you might want to look at those long text fields inside a Tableau CRM, what you might get out of that. And then show you some of the challenges that you run into by default when you try and put a long text field in Tableau CRM, when you try and visualize that on a dashboard. Give you a really quick overview of what HaloSite does and a quick demo there. And that demo will be showing not only HaloSite, but 2 of our Lightning Web Components that we have embedded on the dashboard. So we'll talk about how you use those on the dashboard, and then we'll get into a little bit on how to build those. In addition to introducing myself, I would like to call out, there's a few people lurking in the background on the call today. Tyler's one of them. Tyler was the original engineer working on this. And then Yuri is on here as well. Yuri did the word cloud stuff that I'm going to show you today. So the word cloud is new since the Tableau CRM hackathon. My comment viewer that I'm going to show you is what we submitted for that hackathon and have since put into our product. So that's me up on the screen there. I am at HaloSite. I've been there for about the last 2.5 years. I am a member of the Tableau CRM Partner Advisory Board. Get to work closely with the product managers on things we're doing as an ISV partner with Tableau CRM, part of the Tableau CRM ambassador community, although not nearly as active as some of the members on here that I see in the names out here. It's great to be with you today. I spent about 4 years at Salesforce and about 11 years doing analytics at Oracle before that. So let's jump into things really quickly. Why might you want to get at unstructured data, and what do we mean by unstructured data? So normally when you're inside a Tableau CRM, you're showing off some kind of KPI metric, slicing and dicing by different facets. That mainly represents the structured data inside of Salesforce. In reality, that's a very small amount of data. And so getting into the free-form text fields, case history, notes, chat transcripts, email is a big one. There's great information in there, and trying to extract that information can be a challenge. And so just a real quick example of what we mean by that and why it's interesting, why people are asking us to help them with this. Over on the left, right, this is a standard case, and the agent that's working on this case is probably going to log a case reason, maybe a sub reason, and that's that product malfunction that's highlighted there. Over on the right represents all of the conversation that happened in resolving this case. And if you're anything like me, your eyes probably glazed over when you saw that text up on the screen and you didn't really want to read it. But if you took the time to read it, you would see they talk about charger issues in a couple places. This is a laptop. I'm going to use this laptop sales scenario throughout the demo today. You'll also see where they're talking about replacements, sending out a replacement, waiting for my replacement. They also talk about a keyboard malfunction in there. So more than just that initial charger issue, there's also a keyboard malfunction. And then lastly in there, there's a competitive mention. So, they didn't have this problem with their MacBook, and maybe they wish they had that back. So if I'm a product manager, all kinds of great information that I might want to know about my products, my laptops that I'm selling, that is hidden inside of these text messages inside of Salesforce. And so HaloSite's goal is, how do we get access to that? How do we make that information actionable and usable? Just to give you some real stats here, this is one of our customers that we worked with recently. And this last fall, we looked at about 28,000 cases that they had over 7 months, over 100,000 interactions inside of those cases, emails, notes, chat transcripts, which represented nearly 1 billion words. Now, if you tried to read that yourself, it would take somebody 9.2 years to read all of that data. Obviously, one person's not going to read it. We put it through our natural language processing pipeline in about 3 hours and found a whole bunch of interesting facts and entities and topics. Those topics represent what you were seeing on the previous page, things like charger issues, malfunctions, refunds. So we find all of that information, we generate all of this data in the middle, and then we put all that back into Tableau CRM. And we'll show you a little bit on how we do that today and how we visualize that. So let's talk just a minute about if you just wanted to try and do this yourself, right? So if you want to take unstructured data inside of Salesforce, you're going to run into some challenges. The first one is Salesforce long text field supports up to 131,000 characters. If you go into Data Manager, hit Connect to Data, and try and import that object, an object that has a long text field, you'll get an error. It just errors out and it won't let you do it. If you go into a data flow and digest that object, it will let you do it, but it defaults it to the first 255 characters and it automatically truncates that. So that's one problem. Another problem is, how do you actually visualize it? When you put it on a dashboard, somebody says they want to see the emails on the dashboard, or chatter, something like that. It's really hard to read. There were some great improvements in spring 22 that just came out, word wrapping and scrolling, that helped a lot. But you get this pop-up for really long text. So let's take a quick look at that, and we'll jump over to a demonstration here. So just created a really simple object here and put the beginnings of the Wikipedia article for Salesforce into that text field there. If you go into setup, you'll see that that text field there is a long text area, 131,000. And so now let's take a look at what that looks like on a dashboard. This is the default here. You get the first 255 characters of that. And that's not a great way to read it. You can see I did a quick length calculation of that field, and there's that 255 just to verify that that's what it came through with. Now you can go in and override that precision. You can get it up to 32,000 characters. And when you do that, here you'll see now we get kind of the scrolling that's new in spring 22. And the word wrapping there, but we still didn't get the whole thing unless we hover over it. And then you get this nice little pop-up that kind of pops up in weird places sometimes. And so that's your text. And that's what we're trying to, there's good information in there. How do we make that useful and usable to people? So let me show you just really quick before we jump into the presentation, how you would actually override that. The best way to do that is inside of your data flow. When you digest that object, and you select the fields that you want to digest. After you select the fields, then you get these little edit buttons that pop up here that allow you to override the defaults. And here you can go in here and you can override that precision and set it to 32,000. And so that's what we did back here on this dashboard. You can see this field actually has 1,700 characters in it. But that's kind of the default. So let's go back to the presentation now, take a look at that. Okay, so now if you had 100,000 emails, which one do you want to read, right? Maybe they're not all important. Some of them might be important. And then how do you actually read it? How do you make it useful? That's our goal at HaloSite and what we've tried to accomplish. So make the unstructured data useful and then make it readable on the dashboard. So a little bit of information about us. We are an App Exchange partner, a couple managed packages up on the App Exchange. The first managed package focuses on setting up HaloSite and telling HaloSite what you want analyzed, right? You can go in and say, I want you to analyze all my cases. Yes, I use Chatter. Yes, we attach emails to our cases. I've got these 5 custom fields where people put notes in there, or maybe a custom object. And so that's what you do over here on the left, is you set all that up. And then HaloSite will extract that information. We do temporarily extract it to run it through our natural language processing pipeline. And first thing we do is we start cleaning up the data, right? If you've ever looked closely at how Salesforce stores emails, for instance, stores emails in really ugly fashion. You'll get these big, long email chains, reply chains with headers and footers mixed all through the email. Really hard to look at. Also chat transcripts. The entire chat transcript between an agent and a customer all gets put into one long blob text field. And so cleaning that up. We do things like author identification. So if you've got a big long email chain where they're going back and forth, we actually read through that and extract the author information out of that email chain and say, this person said this particular part of the email chain, so that you can identify who are internal speakers versus who are your customers. We do things like entity and event and attribute detection. If I go into too much detail here, it starts to sound like a 5th grade grammar lesson. We start looking at all the language there. We do sentiment analysis. We also have a couple other scores that we do. In addition to sentiment, we have something we developed called functionality score. We found that when we're working with help desk, generally you're getting people that are a little bit frustrated, and so sentiment gets a little bit kind of slightly skewed to the negative. So functionality score instead focuses, are they describing something working as expected or not working as expected? So -1 is low on the functionality score, +1 is high on the functionality score. We also have something we developed called Halo IQ, and that's just the probability that that block of text actually has something interesting in it. And so we score all of the text that way. When we're done reading all of that data, analyzing that data, then we put all that data back into Tableau CRM. We use the external data APIs to load all of that. We've got some app templates to generate some data flows, recipes, dashboards, data sets. And that's what we're going to jump into now. I'm going to show you a quick little demonstration of what that looks like. And this is where we'll start to see the Lightning Web Components come through. So if we jump in now, again, this was our computer company. We call it Jupiter Computers, fictitious computer company. Got a bunch of support cases in here, about 1,200 cases. And about 15,000 interactions back and forth, messages going back and forth between the agent and the customers, where they're trying to fix the problems with their computers. You can see right here, we've got this word cloud. That is one of the Lightning Web Components that I'll talk to you about today. And then if we scroll down to the bottom, we've got our custom comment viewer. This is what we submitted, or an earlier version of this is what we submitted for the hackathon, and has since gone through several iterations. But let's take a look at this and just try and see how we use this data, how we kind of generate this data. Over on the left, we have a lot of just structured data. That's one of the beautiful things about doing this NLP analysis and putting it back into Salesforce is we can blend it with all of your structured data. So we're bringing in revenue information, standard case counts, and then you're seeing things like the overall sentiment over time and what's happened with that, the number of interactions, case duration. You can add any sort of filters on there that you wanted to. Now in the middle here, this looks like a standard bar chart inside a Tableau CRM, and it is in reality, but that's coming off of the data that we actually generated. So when we say what products are being talked about here, we got a couple of different laptops and different models of our computers here, but that's not the agent tagging the case and saying Europa was discussed in there. That's HaloSite reading all of the notes inside of the case and saying, in 492 of those cases, Europa was mentioned in some way, shape, or form. And then we put that in Tableau CRM so that you can use it just like a normal field. And when we talk about Europa, what else are they talking about? And so here they're talking about power adapter is the #1 thing that gets mentioned when they're talking about Europa. And so if we drill down on that power adapter, we can see what agents were actually handling those cases. Maybe I'm the product manager for the power adapter in our laptop and I want to know what's happening there. And now I can come down here into our custom comment viewer and read things a little bit easier. So a few things that we did here. Here are the topics that are mentioned inside of that block of text. You notice we support multiple topics being mentioned inside of there. So more than just tagging a reason or a case reason. This particular one has warranty, something's broken, shipping, knowledge, and our NLP engine is finding those and tagging those. And then we've highlighting things inside of the text that represents the evidence of that topic being discussed there. So we're trying to highlight the important things that you want to read. You can also see we have this Halo IQ score here. That represents the probability that something interesting is being discussed. You can also swap that out for like the sentiment of that there, or the functionality score that represents, you know, something either working or not working. Now, one thing you might want to know the context, right? Here's a really long comment. There's some good information in there. What is the context? And so when you click on that, that brings up the full conversation, everything that was said inside of this case. And you can scroll through that and look at each individual statement. And we highlight the important things inside of those statements that you're going to want to take a look at. And then you can also turn on or off what you're looking at inside of the statement. So, you know, do you want to look at the topics that we found, or do you want to look at the attributes that we found? You can do that. We put the overall sentiment score up there and the functionality score. Additionally, in our web component, we just built in the ability to pull up the Salesforce record. So that's kind of just replicating the standard Tableau CRM functionality that lets you open up the record in Salesforce.
I think there's I have a question, but I think there's one that is related to what I was thinking. When you're talking about all this data, how are you bringing this in? Are you using it directly from Salesforce? Or are you using connectors? Are you using external data APIs? You know, how are you when you're saying it coming from HaloSite, is it coming into Salesforce and then using the connectors to bringing in, or are you looking directly into Salesforce? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So going back to this slide for just a second, we do pull the data out of Salesforce temporarily. Here we use the bulk APIs to move data outside of out of Salesforce. So once you've told us exactly what you want to analyze, we have a job on our end that goes in, uses the bulk APIs, extracts all that data. We run it through our pipeline and do all the cleaning and NLP detection, stuff like that. When we're done, we don't hang on to any of that data. Instead, we push it back into your org. And to do that, we use the Tableau CRM external data API to load directly into a data set. Depending on your cases or the data that you're analyzing, a single case, we might generate 1,000 NLP facts inside of that case. And the data volume really can explode. So we don't want it to blow up your data inside of Salesforce. We push that straight into Tableau CRM using the external data API. Then once it's there, we have some data flows that we build dynamically based on what you've selected over here in the job setup. So if you tell us cases and you tell us what fields are important to you in the case, we'll bring that in the data flow. And so that data flow is a blending of the HaloSite insights that come in through the external data API and your Salesforce data that's extracted straight from Salesforce and blended together in that data flow. That make sense, Ricky?
Got it. It makes sense for me. I think that's really interesting. Actually, a comment to that, if you were to want to have something back into Salesforce, let's say some of the great insights that you're doing with the scoring, you could technically just use the output connector to push it back in if you want it to be part of the records.
Yeah, one of our customers actually, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. One of our customers actually does that. So they run the HaloSite process. They find some insights about that particular account, and then they push those insights back into Salesforce directly using that output connector and a recipe there to do that.
Yeah, and that's really great, because then you can start setting, you know, workflows and flows up that is basically basing off of that escalation rules, because this is a case that is highly negative or whatever it is else you might want to do. So I think that's a really cool
exactly. One of our customers, just to give you an example there, it's a SaaS company that does like text messaging type apps. And they found that if their customers ever requested an export of data from their system, that was a good indicator that they were probably going to churn and move away from that. And so reading through those text notes and looking for those requests for exports gave them some insight, maybe some proactive ways to go in and talk to their customers about that. Any other questions while we're paused here for a second?
Yeah,
I have a related question.
Yeah, sorry, do you want to go with that related question?
Yeah, because I posted it in the chat also, but I don't know the external data APIs that well, but does it, if you use them, does it mean that it doesn't count for this maximum number of objects to be connected in the Connect in Data Manager? Because you're saying you're directly loading the data into a data set.
That's a good question. It does not show up under Connect as a connected object. It does show up as a data set inside of there, but that's a good question, not positive.
Yeah, no, I can answer that. So the connected objects, it wouldn't count against that. It would count against the row count that you have on your org. So you have how many I think it's 10 billion rows, right, that you have available. So it count against that. And then there's also some external API limits that you have to be aware of. I don't remember it by heart, but they're all in the documentation. So go against that as well.
Yeah, a lot of those limits in the external data API are kind of limits on how you use it. Like there's a size of the chunk of data that you can upload. And that's stuff that our platform just handles as we write the data. So, we've got this massive data file, we chunk it up, we compress it, we send it in, and then Salesforce loads it. So.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, I had a question in Brian. So how many languages are supported? Is the question. I'm assuming is that how many languages are supported through the Halo site?
I knew that was going to be a question for the London DataTribe, and as we got people across them, yeah. Right now, all of our customers are in English. We are in an early phase of doing translation within our system, and what we'll do there for first step, just in kind of full transparency where we're going with this. First step is we are going to translate from the native language into English, do the NLP in English, and provide the insights back in English. Will be the first step, and then we'll look at adding more languages kind of natively within our platform. You'll see kind of, you see a lot of natural language processing tools take that same approach, right? Salesforce with their chatbots started with English only and then started supporting more languages. We'll take that same sort of approach.
Great, thank you.
All right, so let's jump into this word cloud now. So I showed you the Lightning Web component at the bottom there. On the word cloud, this, you can interact with it just like you might on any other widget. So I can click on empathy there. The dashboard will facet or bind depending on how you have that set up. I don't know if anybody else is having this problem, but Chrome is getting incredibly slow. It's not actually my dashboard that's so slow. It's Chrome that's having the issue. But now if you come down here, you can see it's got the comment viewer filtered to the empathy there. So I wanted to show you really quickly how to use these Lightning components, and then we'll talk a little bit how to build those. So I'm going to go in here and just create a new query. This is going against one of our Halo data sets. And I'm going to go in here and say, what topic was mentioned. And so here we can see the mentions of topics inside of this data. And we'll just add that quickly to the dashboard. And then next thing we'll do here is drag on a component. So this is the same component, standard kind of dashboard components. That's where they put the Lightning components as well. And when you click on this, it brings up and says, do you want a dashboard component or do you want a Lightning component? This will bring up the available Lightning components that you can use. You hit done there, and then this is the trick to using the whole thing. When it pops up, it tries to have you build a new query, and it limits you to a single column. So you don't really want to do that. So you hit this change data source here, and then when you hit change data source, you can see you could switch data sources, but you can also use an existing query inside of your dashboard. And so I want to use that query that we just built and is backing that bar chart there. And now you'll notice there's a little exclamation point in here. It means I haven't properly set up my Lightning Web Component. So you click on that, and this component over here has a number of different attributes. In particular, 2 are required. What column in your query represents the word that you want to see in the word cloud, and then what column in your query represents the size of the word. So the size of the word here is now depends on how many times that word was found or that topic was found in the data. And so you can go ahead and preview this and interact with it by default, because we built that into the Lightning Web Component. I'll show you where that is in just a second. One of the things you could do, we put some other attributes in here. If you wanted a custom color scheme, you could do that. Maximum text size. You could also change your word count. So let's change that to 15. Only does the top 15 words returned by that query. So maybe we want to go in and edit this query and do the standard sort of sort it descending and limit that to 15 rows as well. So those are consistent. Now I'm seeing the same words over here as I see over here. And if I interact with the dashboard, the word cloud responds to that. Grab one that's a little bit bigger, highlights the transparency there. And then I can interact with it in either way. What I love about what Salesforce did with the embedded Lightning components is you use the queries behind them exactly like you would any other widget on the dashboard. So if I wanted to put a binding on this and do something with a binding, I just go down here and launch the advanced editor and work with my binding, build my binding right there. If I want it to facet, everything works there as well. So that's just incredible. So let's go back here for just a second to the slides, and then we'll talk a little bit about how to build those. So we'll send these slides out afterwards. I've got links to the documentation. They've also got a good set of examples up on GitHub that you can take a look at, a few different Lightning components, including a word cloud. It's a little bit different than our word cloud. We took some inspiration from that and moved on our own. Like I mentioned, my favorite feature is that it's a widget that acts just like any other widget. Binding and fastening work. If you do want it to interact with, click on the word cloud and have it interact with the dashboard, you do have to implement the set selection method inside of your Lightning Web Component. But when you do that, then it tells the dashboard, hey, your user clicked on something. This is what they clicked on, and the dashboard responds to that. And then it allows you to leverage third-party visualization libraries. So let's take a quick look now at what it takes to, actually, before I do that, sorry. A couple of architecture slides that I just took right out of the documentation here. Your dashboard is running queries, and then you've got widgets that are visualizing those queries. Your Lightning Web Component is just a new widget that's sitting on the page. And then this shows some of the interaction, right? So if you've got in your dashboard, you do some faceting, that query is going to facet, and your Lightning Web Component can react to that. And then if you want to set a selection on inside of your Lightning Web Component, you can react to that as well. So now let's take a look here, jump into the code. First thing you have to do when setting up your Lightning Web Component is you've got to set this target right here. If you're familiar with developing Lightning Web Components, you can say, where do you want this web component to work? Do you want it to work in a community, on a record detail page, or on an analytics dashboard? So by setting that there, that's what makes it show up when you add a component to the dashboard and say, I want to add the Lightning Web Component. So you got to set that target. Next important thing is setting these properties inside of here. So these properties represent the configuration panel that you saw me use, where I went in there and set which column was the label in the word cloud, which column was the size in the word cloud, the max number of words on the canvas. And so that's where you set up all of your configuration that's going to show up in the dashboard builder, is by setting these properties. You'll notice it also says that this has step equals true. That's what says there's a query actually backing this Lightning Web Component. And you can bind columns in the query to properties in the Lightning Web Component. That's what we did there. So next, everything kind of happens in your JavaScript file. Very important thing up here at the top, we import word cloud from a static resource. And so if you go pull up that static resource, this was me going out and finding an open source word cloud visualization library. And so we pulled that in, put it in a static resource, and then we can use it inside of our Lightning Web Component. Another important piece inside of this web component right here, all these API annotations. This is how you interact with the dashboard and with the query coming back in here. So I'll show you in a second. I use this set selection for when the user clicks on the word cloud and I want to send a selection event to the dashboard. And this get results is what gets the results from the query and hands them over to the Lightning Web Component to actually be visualized. And so a couple pieces there. If we scroll down a little bit here. Here you'll see this is our click event right here. So when you click on that word cloud, if there's a selection, then it's going to use this set selection method to tell the dashboard that we've done a selection. And then this represents kind of clearing the selection down there. And so that's how you put together your Lightning Web Components. Obviously, I didn't go into all the details of coding a good Lightning component. This is something where with our developer team, we brought together our Tableau CRM engineers, our Lightning Web Component engineers, and basically would say, you're going to get a bunch of data that looks like this coming back from the dashboard. I need you to visualize that and handle that properly. And then putting that all together, that's how we got HaloSite. And so we've got the NLP stuff that happens outside of the platform. And then we bring all that together and provide a nice way for you to visualize that and read that as well. So that's what I had for you today. Are there any other questions?
I would love to know where you're taking this next. I mean, this is clearly just opening up just like a lot of opportunities. So I'm kind of thinking, are you thinking that, how do we take the workflows then in Salesforce and build some of those things in as well? So it's not just Lightning Web Component, but it kind of gives that end-to-end flow. Is that some of the things that you're considering, or do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Ricky. So a few different areas that we're planning on going next. One is the alerting and workflow sort of options, right? Some of the alerting that we want to do is maybe we detect PII in your unstructured data. We want to let you know, hey, you might want to go clean this up. You've got some PII or something like that inside of the data. So that type of detection and alerting. Just, as you've talked about, kind of general workflow. The ability to provide feedback on the NLP. So if we go back here really quickly to the dashboard, these topics that we define, our customers actually define these topics, like the empathy. How do we find empathy? That's something our customers can define, how we want to identify that inside of the NLP. Well, maybe it didn't get caught right. And so we want the ability to flag that and say, oh, maybe something's not right there, so that you can incrementally improve the quality of the NLP that's coming in there. One of the other things that we're doing is we're working on a new visualization right now, something we call the pulse chart. So if we go in here, sentiment starts to get really watered down, especially we do sentiment at a whole ton of different levels. We do it at the entire document, which represents maybe a case. We do it for an individual block of text. So for this block of text here, we tell you the sentiment of that block of text. Then we do every sentence. And then we do, if you've got like a product mention, like the laptop mention, what's the sentiment right around that laptop being mentioned? And so that we can detect that. Well, we need a good way to visualize that sentiment. So we're actually working on this thing called a pulse chart, where it will show you, if you think about like an EKG showing the pulse, showing where the sentiment's high and low inside of this entire conversation. So a few different things there, the alerting, the feedback on the NLP, and then some different visualizations to add to make this data even more useful. And then Slack's a big one for us, trying to figure out, okay, as Salesforce, more and more people in Salesforce start using Slack, how do we analyze that Slack and connect that with the Salesforce data? That's something else that we're really excited about.
Or maybe even bring some of those alerts to Slack that you're
Yes,
talking about.
absolutely.
That would be really cool too. No, this is really insightful. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm talking. I don't see any other questions, so I'm just going to keep asking if you don't mind.
Go for it.
So another thing that I was kind of wondering is that since this Lightning Web Components is really new, we actually had a webinar earlier today as well around Lightning Web Components. And I think what I'm kind of interested in understanding for those that are just like going into it, is there any aha things where you think, oh, this was really difficult, or I didn't really know how to use this, or it would be great if we could do something like that, or any kind of considerations that you want to share as you were going through the process of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me bring up just really quickly, if you go into the documentation, these API hooks are critical. Understanding the API hooks and what happens there, and maybe some feedback I could say is, it would be helpful if we kind of understood like this set selection here. That's really critical here. It's a function to modify. It's not always clear which of these are methods versus objects, and just, you know, some more information about this, but really understanding this is kind of the key to making everything work. So understanding how you get the results of your query, how you work with that data and convert that into a JSON object that's now inside of your Lightning Web Component that you're manipulating. That was one thing. The other thing that we had to be really careful with, we don't have the problem with this word cloud, right? Because this is pretty small. But when we get into down here in this, there's some performance concerns, because we do some grouping of the data and some sorting of the data in the browser. And you're used to Tableau CRM being this awesome, fast engine. But when I'm returning 468 long text things and then have to loop over them and group them and manipulate it, you need to be careful about your performance considerations if you're building a custom Lightning Web Component, because everything you do in JavaScript is happening browser side instead of server side. And so that's something to be aware of there.
That's really interesting, because one of the things that I also had a question earlier when I was asking about the data set and whether or not you were kind of using it in a connector and then processing it that way. It's kind of around the performance of these text values, especially if you have the long text values coming in. I'm assuming it can't, I don't actually know if you are processing that in the data flow as well, because that might actually have a really long performance optimization on it.
So we try and balance stuff. There are things that we kind of pre-compute on our pipeline side, and so it just comes into the data set properly. People are probably going to cringe when I say this, but we found some interesting use of multi-valued fields and interesting ways to use multi-valued fields. We actually pre-compute all of that ahead of time and send that in a right way, and that decreased the time that it took our data flows to run. And one of the other things that we found is that some of our data sets get really big, and so we process our customers' data nightly. Every night we add a new set of data to that data set. Well, every night the register step in the data flow gets a little bit longer, because when you do that register, it ends up like re-indexing the entire data set. And so we've done some interesting techniques there where we actually drop the data into a staging data set where there's nothing else in there. And that way that register operation happens really quickly, and we can finish that external data API call and call that done. And in the data flow, we then move it and add it into the main data set. So there's been some things there where we've had to do that. I've been surprisingly happy with how fast the text fields work. Quick example, we'll go in and find what's the most common block of text inside of your data. And that means it's a word for word match of this text. And you'll find like legal disclaimers inside of emails. That happens 950,000 times inside this data set. Well, we just want to ignore that and pull that out. It actually comes back incredibly fast inside of Tableau CRM, just saying group by this long text field, and been very impressed with the performance there.
It's really good to know. And I can only agree with the technique that you're applying. I think that those challenges you'll definitely see with the indexing, and especially with a long text value, because that's going to be, you know, there's not that many unique values, or well, there's a lot of unique values that's going to take extra time, right?
Yeah. One of the things we also did is this long text field here, like this one maybe has 30 different facts that we find. We load those into 2 separate data sets, one that has just the text field in it, and then another one that has the 30 facts that we found. And then we join those together in a data flow that sped up our loading process as well.
This is really cool. Awesome work. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And thanks everybody for joining today. I'll work with Inez and Will to get the slides out to you. If you're interested at all in what we're doing, or even how to build some of these Lightning Web Components, happy to reach out, talk to you, reach out to me on LinkedIn, or just come to halosite.com and put a little note on our website, and we'll be happy to get back to you there.
That's very kind of you, Brian. Thank you. Cool. We were just going to have a quick sort of last call for questions. We still have about 8 minutes, but if not, you're just getting a lot of positive feedback in the chat, Brian. Thank you. It was a really impressive solution. It was a pleasure to review it as part of the, as one of the judges of the hackathon. Yeah, it was really good to see it.
I'm also taking advantage and putting your kind offer of connect with LinkedIn, your LinkedIn in the chat. So get ready for the wave.
That ideas.